आने रहा है, क्या करें? ज्वाइन तो कर लिया, वो तो रिकॉर्ड हो गया।
Our director NIAP to welcome the guests with a symbol of growth and resilience and prosperity on behalf of the NIAP family and everyone present here. Please welcome the dignitaries.
तो हमने ज्वाइन किया हमारा ये है प्रोफेसर।
We are indeed honored with online presence of our former directors, Dr. Meenakshi and Dr. Sureshpal, who will be joining shortly, and Dr. Joshi. So our heartfelt warm welcome to Dr. Meenakshi, Dr. Joshi, and Dr. Sureshpal. Since we cannot give them the tree, so let us welcome them with a big applause. So as we come together in unity as a NIAP family, so once again, entire NIAP family wish everyone welcome on whoever is present online and offline. So now we embark on this journey of celebration and inspiration. So first of all, before we commence our festivities, we invoke the blessings of knowledge, enlightenment and prosperity by lighting the ceremonial lamp and taking blessings and offering from Dr. Jha. So with gratitude, I invite our esteemed dignitaries to join us in this tradition of lighting the lamp. As each dignitary illuminate the lamp, they not only symbolize the light of wisdom and knowledge, but also ignite the flame of inspiration within us and remind us of the shared commitment to excellence, innovation and growth that defines our institution. May this lamp radiate warmth and brilliance, guiding us to the path of learning and discovery. Thank you everyone for lighting the lamp. NIAP, earlier called NCAP, was seeded and planted by late Dr. C. Maji, the founding director of NIAP in 1991. This auditorium, as you all know, is dedicated to him for his hard work and endless effort for giving birth to this institution. Later, late Professor Dayanatha Jha, a great institution builder, nurtured NIAP from its infancy to childhood and NIAP fraternity misses him a lot on this day. Hence, it was decided to dedicate this guest lecture on the annual day to late Professor Dayanatha Jha. As we know, this is the 17th in the series. As we progressed and crossed teenage and childhood, adulthood, we know there are so many issues and challenges in the institution. So these challenges were overcome by our former directors, Dr. Mrityunjay, Dr. Gulshin, Dr. Amishan, who is also present here, and Dr. Suresh Pal. They all overcame these challenges and came across the path of success. As a result of their hard work, in 24th year of the NCAP, in February 2015, we were elevated to the status of institute, and now it is called NIAP, as you all know, and this was done under the able guidance of our chairman of today's function. So today, by standing on the shoulders of the giants, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to all the former directors whose timeless and tireless efforts and unwavering commitment have nurtured this institute into what we are today. This legacy of dedication and excellence continues to inspire us as we march forward towards new horizons of achievement. So now, as we embark on this journey of celebration and reflection, it is my honor to invite our director, Professor Pratap Singh Betalji, to share with us insights and perspectives on our institute's remarkable journey and its sterling achievements. So please join me in welcoming him as he present and welcome address and achievements of NIAP.
Good morning, everybody. Respected chair of today's function, Professor Amishan, our chief guest and today's speaker, Professor J. Meenakshi, Dr. Arshi Agarwal, our DDG, Dr. Ajit Yadav, our ADG in the Education Division, who looks after the matters of this institute, Dr. Parmanand, Director WPC, Dr. Anjani Kumar, our former colleague and now at IIIT, Dr. Dayanatha, Director ICAR, our former colleague Dr. LP Singh and Dr. Smita Shiroli, and all of my dear friends and colleagues and all our valued guests. I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you on the occasion of the third Foundation Day celebrations of our institute. Well, friends, Dr. Rajni has already thrown some light on the journey of that institute. And this institute was established in 1991, primarily to cater to the growing needs of economics and policy inputs, particularly into the policy makers in the National Agricultural Research Systems, particularly to the ICAR and also to the other ministries and departments engaged in agriculture and rural development. And over the years, of course, all of you will agree with me, we have made tremendous progress. So there are always ups and downs in the careers of the persons and the growth of the institutes. And in its first QRT, Professor V.S. Vyas, who was the chairing guest, he has remarked that the institute has come to the expectations of its sponsors, and it should be nurtured vigorously to contribute to the development of the agricultural sector. These were the remarks of Professor V.S. Vyas, and they are still there in our QRT reports. Well, friends, of course, since long, we have been trying to reinvent ourselves, trying to keep pace with our research issues which are emerging globally and within the country also. And of course, try to remain at the forefront of agricultural economics and policy research in the national agriculture research system. Well, friends, when we celebrate the birth of this institute today, this celebration, of course, has a very important component. And We dedicate this day to our late Professor Dayanatha Jha, who laid a very strong foundation of this institute, particularly its work culture. He taught us, because we began with a very small faculty at that time. Dr. Mester and myself, Dr. Salva Rajan, and Dr. Suresh Pal, Dr. P.K. Joshi, about 8 or 9 persons. But the kind of work we used to do that brought a lot of visibility of this institute. And still, it was at that time we used to call it NCAP, but people still remember it as an NCAP, not an NIAP, despite its affiliation to the institute. Well, friends, you know, people come in these worlds, and of course, after completing the journey here, they leave for the heavenly abode. But some people अपनी छाप छोड़ जाते हैं, और उन्हीं में से प्रोफेसर दयानाथ था सक्सेसफुल। और ये लेक्चर जो है उनकी मेमोरी में हम ऑर्गेनाइज करते हैं। एंड दिस ईयर आई just talked to Professor J. Meenakshi, and she readily agreed to that because of his association, his family's association with Professor Dayanatha Jha. So thank you. I welcome you, Dr. Meenakshi, for accepting our request to deliver this lecture. And all of you may be aware that Professor Meenakshi was earlier with the School of Economics. Now she is professor at the IIIT. So once again, I welcome you and for accepting our request to deliver the lecture. Well, friends, we are very extremely happy that we have our former director, now member of Agriculture Committee, Professor Meenakshi, and he is always there with us to thick and thin. Whenever we need him, he is always there with us. He often comes, keeps on talking to not only to me but other colleagues also about the progress of the institute, the kind of work we have been working. So, sir, entire faculty and staff of the institute joins me in welcoming to this. And we have our former director, Dr. Matinda, he is online. Dr. Suresh Pal, I think he is online. Dr. P.K. Joshi, yes, only in the morning I got his message that he is traveling, so he will not be able to join us, but he has sent his best wishes for the annual function and the message, which I think that President will be reading out later. Dr. Bara is also, I think he is also available online. And all other colleagues who are available online, I extend a very warm welcome to all of our former directors, former colleagues, and all the agricultural economics research fraternity here. Well, friends, morning I got a message from our PDG. Because of some urgency, he could not join us. So, but he is always there with us, with our faculty. He always motivates us to venture into new areas of research. And I extend a very heartfelt welcome to him in his absence. Well, friends, ICAR is organized in such a manner that from BDG to DDG, and we come under the Assembly of Agriculture Education Division. So we have with us our DDG, Dr. Akshay Agarwal. And in fact, we say that he is our immediate supervisor. He always takes keen interest in the institute's activities. And he is a pillar and of support and strength to our institutes in more than one way. In more than one way. Whenever we approach him, he is always positive and tries to overcome the obstacles or any kind of problem that we face. So we welcome you for your benign presence. Well, friends, another pillar of our strength is our ADG, who immediately handles our issues related to the institute administration, research, and Dr. Dayanatha Jha. He is also very supportive in all the kind of activities, whether it's related to financial, academic, or administrative aspects. Sir, very heartful welcome to you to this institute. Of course, you have been coming. We take this opportunity to welcome you on these occasions. Well, there are other ADGs in the education division who always help us in many activities. And of course, they are not available today here, but I extend a very welcome to all of them. Friends, I take this opportunity to welcome the directors of our sister institutes. Of course, the two of the directors are here, Dr. Indraprastha, Director ICAR-NIAP, Dr. Barmanan, Director WTC Center IRI, and all those who are joined online, let's say DDGs, ADGs, or the faculties, the 12th class in sister institutes. So my special thanks to all of our colleagues from the NAS, from the CTIR, that Ranjini Kumar is here, and I think some of them are online also. So I welcome you all, and once again, I express my sincere gratitude to the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, and all our valued guests to be a part of the celebrations of our ICAR Foundation Day, and the lecture, memorial lecture delivered by the Prof. Thank you and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, before we delve into the insightful words of our esteemed speaker, allow me to set the stage by offering a brief introduction of the speaker. Professor J. Meenakshi is our esteemed guest today on 33rd Foundation Day of ICAR-NIAP. She is a professor at Indraprastha Institute of Information Technology, commonly called IIIT Delhi. Before joining IIIT Delhi, she was a professor at the Department of Economics, Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. She has taught courses on agricultural policy, survey sampling methods, causal inference, and econometrics, and has guided several PhD students. She earned master's and later a doctoral degree in agricultural economics from Cornell University. She started her career at the Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram in 1991. Later, joined the D School in 1992. From 2004 to 2008, she headed Harvest Plus Impact and Policy Research Unit at IFPRI in Washington, D.C. Her research interests include the economics of health, nutrition, and food, with a focus on the interface between agriculture and nutrition, characterizing cereal and water markets, and evaluating agricultural and welfare interventions. She has made significant contributions to the economics research, particularly in agricultural economics. Professor Meenakshi has been actively involved in policy formulations as a member of several high-level committees of various ministries of the Government of India and other organizations. From June 17 to January 19, she was a member of National Statistical Commission, MOSPI. From July 17 to April 21, she was a member of Standing Panel on Impact Assessment of CGEIR's Independent Science and Partnership Council. She is currently on the advisory board of AgEcon Search and also a member of the Technical Committee on Cost of Living Indices constituted by MOSPI. Her research primarily focuses on India, but she has also worked on agricultural issues in Sub-Saharan Africa. Her research has been published in high-impact international and national journals. She is currently co-editor of Food Policy and was previously an associate editor of Agricultural Economics and Indian Economics Review. Professor Meenakshi and her family had close professional relations with the late Professor Dayanatha Jha, which is making her a natural choice to deliver this 17th lecture in his memory today. She is our first female distinguished guest to deliver the Professor faculty and staff of ICAR-NIAP and our esteemed guests are looking forward to listening to her on very pertinent and important contemporary topic, that is evaluating impact at a scale. Now, on behalf of NIAP family and the August gathering, we invite our chief guest for her lecture on evaluating impact at a scale. But before that, esteemed Professor Meenakshi ma'am, allow me to present the citation encapsulating the gratitude and admiration of all present here for your invaluable contribution to the economics vertical. So with this, ma'am, we invite you to deliver the 17th Jha Memorial. So presentation what we done? Okay, let me just get started. So first and foremost, thank you very much for inviting me. It's indeed an honor and a privilege for this opportunity. As has been mentioned, I do have a family connection. I did have the privilege of working with Professor Jha personally in my research. But I have to say that my first introduction to what was then NCAP came through him, where he actually just saw a lot of potential for collaboration and had invited me to come and give some talks here and collaborate with various people, not just in NCAP, but also across other agricultural universities. And this was close to maybe 24. I don't remember the year actually, but about 24 years. Okay. So it's really a privilege for me to be able to remember him on this particular page. So the topic that I'm going to talk about today is assessing impact at scale. I know the audience is mostly agricultural economics, and we do impact assessments as part of our bread and butter tools. So आप कहेंगे कि आप क्या नया होने वाली है. So focus is going to be slightly different in the sense that I want to talk about impact assessment at scale. So why do we want to do this, and what are the different methods? And my attempt will be to just walk you through examples. So it's not going to be a methodology lecture. This is certainly not the occasion for it, but to also perhaps talk about some potential research ideas that we can come up with, or research approaches rather than research ideas that we can come up with. And so I'll just briefly talk about what I plan to cover in the next 40-45 minutes, which is to just look at why we want to look at impact. And how we want to look at impact in terms of outcomes and what kind of approaches we want to follow. And then I've covered 3 basic methodologies, all of which I think are perhaps familiar to people in this audience. Certainly randomized controlled trials are familiar, quasi-experimental evaluations are familiar, and then I talk about this monitoring, evaluation, learning, and impact assessment. And just walk us through examples of how these have been employed and perhaps what lessons we can draw for the way that we conduct our own research. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there is a long and rich literature to which many of us in this room have contributed, where we document impacts of technologies, be it hiding variety seeds, be it policy intervention. But a lot of these tend to be based on relatively small scale studies in a few villages, or perhaps in a few districts, and often are sort of therefore representative of those areas and not necessarily generalizable to other contexts. So that is a tradition that we have. The other sort of focus has now shifted away from looking at these with and without or before after comparisons that have characterized much of our work, to looking at things that are causal in nature. In other words, you've heard of this river revolution, in economics and in agricultural economics, which basically says, let's move away from correlational studies to try and get at more causal studies. And this is the part of the methodological shift that I wish to explore in this talk. The next slide. The other shift has happened in terms of what outcomes we look at. So as agricultural economics, we are trained to think about if we have a new variety, what is its adoption? How many farmers have adopted this, and why have people not adopted it? We don't see close to saturation levels of adoption. And also sometimes we'll go beyond that to look at yields and maybe farmer profits, and then we kind of stop there. But the more recent literature in the last 10, 12 years has said, okay, we need to look at effects beyond this adoption in yields. There was actually a paper that came on the global effects of the Green Revolution by Doug Gollan and his colleagues, which found that if you look at the way that the Green Revolution has evolved, you can probably attribute about 10% in world income to technologies associated with the Green Revolution. So there is a shift in focus away from looking at adoption in yields. Not to say they're not important, because these are necessary first steps, but to look at broader aspects of outcomes, including who has benefited from the technology. Have certain people been marginalized because of the adoption of technology? Who are the winners? Who are the losers? Are there unanticipated effects, as both positive and negative, as I will try and demonstrate through some of these examples? And the other focus that has happened, apart from looking at a broader range of shifting focus that's happened, apart from looking at a broader range of outcomes, is to say, what has been the impact at scale? Many of our policies, many of our technologies are implemented at very large scale. If we are implementing them at large scale, should we not be actually assessing these impacts at a large scale and ask, are these investments that have gone into the R&D and the dissemination efforts, are these justified? And this is not a new question necessarily. I think what has changed is perhaps the methods that we use to answer these questions. And if I think back to the work in the 70s and 80s, for instance, there was a lot of focus on return. What are the benefits and costs of investment in R&D, and these benefits were, of course, measured in terms of incomes and so on. And indeed, Professor Jha's own early work falls very much in this category of rigorously establishing the rates of return to agricultural research and rigorously establishing benefits and costs of various agricultural interventions. So it's not perhaps a new question, but maybe what has changed is to go beyond looking at rates of return to try and look at cost effectiveness in a more comprehensive manner. And so the related question is, if you have small scale studies that are necessary to establish proof of concept, perhaps in the experimental field, perhaps in farmers' plots, are you able to see impacts as the technology diffuses? And if you don't, what are the elements of the causal chain from proof of concept or eventual impact that may be getting broken and can be trying to fix those broken things? So that's the overall context, I think. And alongside, as I mentioned, there's this revolution that has happened which explicitly recognizes that even within a community, they may target certain areas for early intervention and other areas for late intervention. We've certainly done that, let's say, in the context of Manrega at a much larger scale, but we also do it at a fairly small scale. But even within a community, there are systematic differences between which farmers adopt and which farmers don't adopt, so that they're not necessarily a representative sample of potential adopters of a given technology or potential users or beneficiaries of a given intervention. And if we don't recognize that this in itself, the fact that beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries or adopters and non-adopters are systematically different from each other, then our inferences are likely to be biased. And so the biased inference also means that since these are iterative processes that we learn from research and then we go ahead and design further interventions, then the way that we design future interventions can also be flawed. So the idea is to try and take into account these differences in which areas are targeted first, which farmers are targeted first, to give an example, and account for it in the way that we assess. In fact, this is actually the whole raison d'etre, for the lack of a better phrase, for causal approaches. And as far as causal approaches are concerned, when we look at impacts of scale, there have been three broad approaches that have been followed. As I mentioned in the outline, the first is randomized controlled trials. Here I'm talking about prospective randomized controlled trials, quasi-experimental methods, and finally, as I said, MELIA. And just to kind of dot the methodological I's, it needs to be emphasized that each of these relies on different autonomous identification strategies for ensuring that this. So maybe I can pause and see if there are any questions, or would you like me to, any clarification questions, perhaps you can next ask me now. So let me start with randomized controlled trials. And again, the emphasis, if we go to next door to PUSA, all our scientists, colleagues are actually doing randomized controlled trials. They're doing it at the plot level. So this is not a concept that is new to us about conducting. In fact, the whole concept of randomized controlled trials was in fact discovered or invented, I don't know how to call it, by Ronald Fisher in the 1920s. People don't recognize that this RCT as a mechanism started in agriculture because he was actually working on wheat farms in Scotland. He's a statistician involved in his various tests. And it went from agriculture, in fact, to medical sciences. From medical sciences, it was something that we have come to adopt as a community of social sciences. So why is there this interest in randomized controlled trials at scale? So not just randomized controlled trials, but things being implemented at a high scale. So one of the concerns has been that, well, we say, okay, you have a lot of small scale studies. We're all aware of meta-analyses, and in the medical literature, these are called Cochrane reviews. So there are several small scale studies that we use, and you try and say, well, you use exclusion criteria, inclusion criteria, and try and come up with a consensus about what these studies say, and use that to design our intervention. So the claim is that meta-analyses don't often suffer. So this is not enough to do, that you can't take a bunch of maybe small randomized controlled trials or maybe even small observational studies and aggregate them using statistical techniques to say that therefore this is going to have generalizability. The second class of issues, and I'll explain with an example why that doesn't hold. The second reason why we want to look at why there's been an interest in randomized controlled trials is this question of external validity. As I said earlier, if we do studies in a few villages, how do we know that it is generalizable even to the district, let alone the state, or let alone the country? So that you may have an internally valid sort of design, but you're not getting generalizability that we call external validity. So if you have a randomized controlled trial and it's representative of the randomization is happening over large geographies. I haven't mentioned what I mean by large, but I will in just a minute. Then you don't have these concerns. So something is happening at the state level, it may be perhaps even at the national level. It can also happen at the level of a region, a collection of districts. So we don't have to worry too much about where we draw the line between small and large. And the other advantage of RCTs that is perhaps the most compelling from an economics perspective is that when we intervene, when there is technology adoption, there are a whole bunch of multiplier effects. What we learned as called multiplier effects, you have a supply shock, there will be impacts on prices. If the prices fall, then those have more general welfare effects, etc., etc. That's an example of a positive set of linkages that operate. And we want to be able to capture what we call general equilibrium effects. If you're doing it in a very small region, then you're not going to be able to capture. These are necessarily effects that work themselves through market institutions. So if you're able to generalize over a large scale, then you're able to account for these general equilibrium effects. And the other final thing is that this is just a practical thing. We have a great proof of concept. Is it actually working in community settings? So the public health literature has a concept, indeed, even the medical literature has this concept of proof of concept, which they call efficacy. In the COVID vaccine case, those were phase 1, phase 2 trials. And then they have this notion of effectiveness, which is what is happening at the community level when the researcher's ability to monitor behavior is rather limited, where in the COVID, the vaccine kind of jargon, it would be called testing. So the idea of looking at experimentation at scale is to really have these effectiveness studies or these phase 3 trials for things that we as economists and agricultural economists work through. And this has been perhaps articulated the best by a paper by Muralidharan in Nehaus. Karthik Muralidharan is one of the people who sort of spearheaded this research, and Abhijit Banerjee. Next slide, please. So I want to perhaps explain this through examples. The first example is not to do with agriculture, but rather with vitamin A supplementation. It continues to be our policy that we should have vitamin A supplementation for newborns and young children. And the idea is that they should be done in vitamin A endemic areas, but in India, the general feeling is that most areas are vitamin A deficient. And so this is supposed to be what we should do for our young children, sometimes also pregnant women or women who have just given birth. And the evidence for this came from the WHO. So, but the WHO based its recommendation on 9 quote-unquote small studies. These were actually all randomized controlled trials, including a study from India, but across the world, with just 9 studies. And a meta-analysis, it's actually a Cochrane review that suggested that if you decided to do this vitamin A supplementation, then there would be a 24% reduction in under 5 years of age mortality, which is a huge number. Now, it turned out that, when you combine studies, some studies which show positive results, some studies which show negative results. The one from India was the one which was not very convincing about a reduction. And so this led researchers at AIIMS and at Sitaram Bhartiya Institute and others to actually investigate using a large scale study. So they looked at an intervention involving working with Anganwadi centers that looked at vitamin A supplementation, deworming, because that itself can reduce the immunity levels of young children. So these are the treatment arms of the randomized control trial, and they wanted to see what was the impact of vitamin A supplementation versus deworming versus both on things like morbidity, on health, and on mortality. And so this was done obviously in the early 2000s. It takes time for it to materialize. They worked with almost 8,000 Anganwadi centers in UP and recruited about 1 million children that came through the Anganwadi centers. These were the total sample size for that, which is a huge. You can imagine that this is a huge effort. I should also note that this large sample size is because one of the outcomes of mortality. And since mortality is a rare event, fortunately, you need much larger sample sizes. For most outcomes that we look at, we wouldn't be thinking about sample sizes of 10 lakh kids. But what was sort of controversial about this is while they do find substantial impacts on morbidity, they found no impact whatsoever on mortality. And so the very real question, this paper was also very controversial because it went against what the WHO was saying. These are all respected researchers based here in India. The point is, if you want to continue vitamin A supplementation, then the reason for that is not going to be reduction in mortality, because we saw in a fairly large case, in an actual on-ground implementation, that it doesn't seem to have any impact. Now, the criticism was that there was a lot of problems with compliance. You can imagine to manage this kind of a trial is not easy to do. So there was a lot of methodological critique about when the protocols weren't implemented, etc. But the pushback is that this is the reality. This is how we work. This is how the Anganwadi centers work, etc., etc. And so the question they asked, for which there is actually not yet an answer, is that should we actually dispense with the recommendation of vitamin A supplementation? I gave this as a example only to say that we think that meta-analyses work, and they do for the most part. But there's also some work by Lan Pritchett in a recent last year in the Review of Development Economics in 2023 that says that you also have to think about what biases are there in the various inclusion and exclusion criteria, and that meta-analyses aren't always a panacea. So this was why I had wanted to include this example. Next slide, please. The other example I want to give is from the PDS and this Aadhaar-based biometric authentication. And this was actually done by Muralidhar and his colleagues in Jharkhand with the involvement of the state government. So the randomization that they did, so the idea was to say, well, these electronic point of sale machines was supposed to be installed in each of the ration shops and manage the sort of stock of what is being kept in the ration shop, and they would release grains to the ration shop only when the sort of electronic stock register said that there were no undisbursed amounts, and that's only then would the FPS get, the ration shop get its next set of supplies. So what they tried to track, the outcomes they tracked is how much cereals were disbursed, what is the value of what was disbursed, and what are the quality of benefits. So they randomized over 132 blocks in 17 districts. I think Jharkhand is maybe 24 districts, so it's representative of at least 17 of the 24 districts. It represented 33 lakh beneficiary households. And notice the sample size here is much smaller. It's only about 4,000 households that were surveyed at baseline, and then they had follow-up periods at which these were surveyed. And the reason why you go to such small sample sizes was because the outcomes we're interested in are easy to capture and not as rare as mortality, as was the case with the vitamin A supplementation. So this has also been a rather controversial paper, and if you like to follow the controversy, you can look at the Ideas for India blog. So these were the treated groups, and of course the control groups, control blocks continue to have the regular way that PDS is implemented in Jharkhand. Next slide, please. So what did they find? And this is again published in a very high-end journal. They found there was no effect of these electronic point of sale machines on the quantity of cereals, no impact on the quality of food disbursed, and in fact had some negative consequences. So they had much higher transaction costs, largely because instead of going once a month or twice a month to the ration shop, you had to go multiple times because the EPOS machine wasn't working. So the transaction costs for households increased a lot. And because there was incomplete Aadhaar seeding at the time of the survey, there was a lot of people who were therefore automatically excluded from receiving benefits from the PDS, only on account of this. And these households, unfortunately, were the people who could least afford to not avail of benefits from the PDS because they tended to be poorer, they tended to be less education. So one of the reasons why this was also very controversial is that what are our ethics as researchers, that when you see something is not just not going right, but it's actually causing harm, then should you not pull the plug and say, the medical people do this all the time. If they see unanticipated effects, because when they do drug trials, some bad things can happen, then they have protocols to immediately stop the trial and say, let's take a look at what's wrong with the medicine before we proceed. We've also seen in the newspaper the side effect of Covishield on clotting and how they're only acknowledging it now. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why it became controversial. And the other reason was to say, well, the decline in corruption, which is what the EPOS machines were supposed to be doing, was relatively modest. Weigh that benefit against the cost that legitimate beneficiaries who should have gotten food. This is not something like a durable good where I can postpone consumption. the legitimate beneficiaries were denied denied food, or at least asked to get food from the private market, was it worth the cost that these beneficiaries had to incur, and the beneficiaries who incurred these costs were disproportionately poor and less educated. The other reason why I wanted to include this example is also to say very often as researchers, and I'm guilty of this as an ex-person, we want positive results. Nobody wants to say कि intervention हुआ कुछ काम उसका कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ, right? Nobody wants to say this, and one of the reasons why we don't want to say this is because of what is called in the publication bias, that nobody will publish a null. Quite apart from whether this is acceptable or not, no self-respecting journal is going to publish a non-result or perhaps even a negative result. But that has also been a change, I think, in the profession for the good, which is to say that it is important to state that you have a null result. It is important to state that you have a negative result. So I think that has been a shift in the right direction. This was certainly not true when I was sort of starting. Let me pause and see if there are just any questions about these two examples that I've given. So this is at the state level, so that's large. That's at UP level, that's large. These are what I mean by large scales. Okay, next slide, please. So I think, we're all enamored of randomized controlled trials, and I must confess I've done a few of them. I've done a few of them myself. But it's important to understand what they can and cannot do. And the question being that if there is unequal access to infrastructure, e-infrastructure, is randomization necessarily the best design? Because we are all trained to think RCTs are the gold standard. So one of my sort of submissions is that randomized controlled trials are just a method. They have positive aspects, they have negative aspects, and it's important to acknowledge that it's just another tool. There are reasons why theoretically it's considered the gold standard, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the way to go for almost all our research ideas. It's far from the case. In fact, Land Pritchett has this phrase called Trinity for success, which is that the design is instrumentally correct. In other words, you don't go into areas where you have uneven implementation capacity. It has political support, and it is administratively feasible. And before I walk away from the ABA, I also want to note that this does not mean that digitization has been a failure. Far from it. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there is, in fact, when reduction in leakages through digitization of transactions. It's just that evidence necessarily hasn't come from randomized controlled trials. So that's why that particular bullet is there. So I've sort of said enough of what I wanted to say about randomized controlled trials. The next slide, please. I now want to move to what are known as quasi-experimental evaluations at scale. And one of the advantages why people prefer these are that they can speak to the question of both long-term and large scale. And they are part of a growing literature on persistence of effects of policies, of technologies, of institutions. 2 years ago, Melissa Dell won the Clark Medal for her work on the mining communities in Peru in the 1800s, how things that have historical events tend to have persistence into 200 years. We're not looking at those kinds of timeframes, but at least over the long term of 10, 15, 20 years, these quasi-experimental methods allows to ask those questions. And the other appeal is that, whether it's 4,000 households, but you're randomizing them over 64 blocks, you can reduce data burden. One of the nice things about small scale is that I have tight control over my research design, my survey design. I know I've done it well. The larger you get, the more chances there are that the implementation of the survey will have lots of gaps. And so the idea is that this reduces data burdens, and because there's a lot of availability of nationally representative data sets, we have satellites, we have online monitoring and evaluation resources. So oftentimes these studies don't need you to do any fieldwork whatsoever. So next slide, please. So one example of this is a paper by Shikul Setri, where she looks at the AEZs that were established, I think, in 2002 under APEDA, and where they set up these clusters, export promotion zone clusters in all across India. And the selection of a particular cluster was based on the suitability of growing the crop and proximity to the state agricultural university. So what she does is she starts with looking at the fact that this was stated, the selection criteria for what would qualify to be a AZ cluster is what she starts with. And so she creates, what she does is, okay, we know where these clusters are. She looks at areas which are sort of geographically proximate to these districts, and then looks at she looks at the central groundwater board data for groundwater depths. She looks at the productivity potential map data that you get from the FAO, looks at sort of Google Earth basically to look at the distance between the State Agricultural University and the AEZ cluster, and combines these to do an event study or a DID. And accounts for the fact that these are spatial spillovers, because we know that when we look at groundwater, then I did know where my neighbor, it affects the groundwater depths in my neighbor, and we're all part of the same aquifer. Often the treated and control groups are both part of the same aquifer. These control groups have been constructed using other data sets. She didn't do any kind of field work for this study. The next slide, please. And what she finds is, in fact, that although the AEZ was perhaps this was not the intent, this is an example of maybe an adverse outcome that we had not anticipated, that she finds that there is an increase in the depth of the groundwater table in the AEZ clusters that is attributable to the fact that these are AEZ clusters, which doesn't happen in the counterfactual clusters. So this is on the order of 0.15 standard deviations. In terms of average depth to the groundwater table. Whether that's a big number or small number is something for us to decide. And she finds that the effects were much more pronounced. The depth increases far more within the AEZ clusters that are located in areas that were already designated as being dark blocks by the Central Groundwater Board. That's as far as a biophysical outcome is concerned. The other thing that she does look at is use the NSS data to look at what happened to wages, what happened to expenditures, which we would often always use as proxies for income. And she finds that there was an increase in nominal wages because of the AEZ, which was one of the objectives, of course. But actually, it didn't happen in real terms. When you deflate the increase in income, she finds that there was no increase in real wages, and no change in expenditures for marginal and large farmers, but there was actually a decline in expenditures for small farmers. And she has a whole host of robustness checks and ruling out other explanations for these results. And it's a nicely and carefully done piece of work, and it came out in 2023, although the policy, if you recall, is at least 20 years old for me. So this is an example of a quasi-experimental approach. Next slide, please. So, I mean, in some sense, the quasi-experimental approach is useful because it allows you to take a step back. It can say, these were intended outcomes, but there may have been some unintended outcomes as well. And they allow you to leverage, because now data science is something that all of us need to know, and machine learning is something that all of us need to know. These are powerful tools that enable us to combine across data sources and use them profitably in our analysis. But the downside is, of course, that they are by their very nature exposed to nature. So if there were sort of changes in policy on, let's say, the AEZs, which were not documented and therefore are not available to me 15 years later, then the analysis cannot account for them because we just don't have information on these course corrections, let's say, that the APEDA may have undertaken. And also because these days everybody knows that we have to kind of do a theory of change and look at all the elements in that causal chain. you are constrained by data. If you have the data, you can look at outcomes. If you have the data, you can say, well, what was the first order impact? What was the second order impact? But that presupposes that somebody is collecting the data. If you don't have that data, then you can't answer those questions about where in the causal chain things got worse or things got better, and also does not address questions of cost effectiveness. And I have more examples later in my presentation, but I'm not going to go over them unless there's some question about them. Next slide, please. I finally want to talk about, I think, what is perhaps somewhat new, and this does come from, I must say, engaging with the impact assessment community as part of the CGIR when I was on the standing panel on impact assessment. And so a lot of these examples are driven by the question that, you can't do RCTs, you can't, because it's just not practical, not because there's anything wrong with them, it's just that this is not a practical way of doing things. But at the same time, you don't want to go, I made my career initially by mining NSS data to a large extent, and it was much later, about after 5 or 6 years, that I started working on field studies simply because it was not feasible for me. So you are kind of restricted by what data is available. But the key message, I think, that we all need to understand is that you can't do impact assessment later. So if you're doing a diffusion, if you're doing a rollout of an intervention, then the impact assessment has to be baked in along with the design of the implementation. So technology development has happened, that's okay. But once technology development has happened and you're actually rolling it out, then it's important to have that impact assessment in mind. And I'm not sure that we have that culture here yet. Maybe those things are also changing, but this was certainly a lesson that I learned just by looking at what a lot of the CG centers were doing. And the other advantage is that if you're kind of engaged early, you can document whether they have done any changes. You can document that easily. You can track costs because there may be multiple ways of achieving the same improvement in welfare. You're able to track costs and say that this is more cost effective than other. And here, instead of saying either do fieldwork or do nationally representative data sets, you do a combination of both. And to my mind is perhaps the most promising way forward for looking at questions of impact at scale. And once again, I'll start with I'll give you an example. Next slide, please. So the idea of the MELIA is that you work with the monitoring evaluation. So M and E is monitoring and evaluation. Most projects and most implementation will have a component of monitoring and evaluation. The L stands for learning. So you learn as you roll out and you incorporate that learning into your diffusion criteria. And the IA is the impact assessment. So what this involves basically is you start with the monitoring and evaluation teams. You document their dissemination and extension efforts, geocode them. That is usually at the village. And if there is any variation in certain areas get saturated, certain areas don't get saturated, that is normal. That's what we expect as technology diffuses, just document. So it's not asking the rollout team to do anything different. It's not saying please randomize, nothing like that. It's just saying whatever you're doing, just document. And again, as I said, if there are changes in the way that rollout is happening, just document that as part of the learning exercise. And geocoding is very useful because increasingly there are lots of databases. The Shrug database, for instance, by Sam Asher is an example. Our Bhuvan portal is another example where a lot of data is already available, which is geocoded. So if you have geocoded information that allows you, that expands the range of outcomes that you can look at. And here you can say, fine, at the end of 5 years or at the end of 3 years, I will come and do a survey because I don't have data sets that have all the outcomes that I'm interested in assessing. Next slide, please. So the example I want to give is by the Foundation for Ecological Security. It works in Rajasthan, Karnataka, Andhra. Basically, it's a semi-arid it works in these semi-arid regions. And their idea is to restore degraded commons, because common lands are increasingly being either privatized or degraded. And their intervention here is not a technology necessarily, but it's actually looking at collective actions. They work with the villagers and communities and employ a whole host of tools to talk about how the commons lands can be protected. So they have actually scaled this to about 20,000 villages, and they're about 22 lakh hectares. So again, you think 20,000 is large or small, I'll leave it to you, but my submission is that 20,000 villages, in fact, or even 22 lakh hectares is large. But most importantly, the NGO actually kept detailed records of which village it's working with. So this is not at the household level, this is at the village level, what household it's working with, and why they work in certain areas and not in others. Maybe they work in areas where the extent of degradation is very large, or they have already some other contacts, because these are high transaction cost interventions, and they have, of course, support from GOI as well, but it's essentially a collective action based intervention. Next slide. So what the impact assessment team did, which was independent, was to say that work with the monitoring and evaluation team to say, all right, these are the places you have worked in, and these are the characteristics of the places that you have worked in. So let me take a random sample, stratified random sample. I think they took about 500 villages, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 20,000. And then use, in fact, information on those characteristics to find comparable villages that are not necessarily geographically nearby, but share common characteristics in terms of degradation, in terms of whether caste composition of the village, etc., etc. They have a whole host of criteria they use. So they're actually, many of us here will know about matching. Normally we do matching at household level or firm level. Here they're actually using the village level information to match. So they know which villages are getting treated. They also ask the M&E team, where are you going to go next? Because that is likely to be the best counterfactual for the villages that are already treated, and use the counterfactuals or the control group, so-called villages, based on this criteria. If they didn't have the monitoring and evaluation information, they couldn't have done this, right? Because they just say, I've gone to 20,000 villages. Maybe they can even give you names, but they can't tell you why they went to certain places first and they didn't go to other places first. So the involvement of the monitoring and evaluation team is extremely crucial in this kind of an approach. And then in fact, this work has not yet been published. I happen to see an earlier draft of it. They explored the variation in the length of exposure to the FES intervention to look. First, use satellites to see, are the areas where FES has intervened seeing more vegetative cover than the areas, because now satellites can do this at a great deal of granularity. Are they higher than the areas where the FES has not yet intervened that are otherwise comparable? So this is again taken from satellite data. But then they have also gone in and undertaken a field survey of households in these villages, a random sample of villages where FES has worked, and also the random sample of households in villages where the FES has not yet intervened, and hopefully nobody else has also running an NGO there. So this is so I don't have outcomes to share, but the draft that I do have does suggest increase in vegetative cover, but no improvement in household outcomes. So that's a bit intriguing, because you would expect this improvement in vegetative cover to also affect household welfare metrics, and that doesn't seem to happen. But that's sort of off the record, because they're still trying to figure out why that might be. Next slide, please. So again, with each technique, I'm also giving you my take on what's good and what's bad about it. I think of the tools that we have, this is impact at scale. In my view, this is the most promising, because it's relatively low cost. The other thing you will say is, God, do I have to go and sit with the M&E team for 5 years? That's not the case. As long as you sort of invest some time upfront when the rollout is being designed and planned, and make sure that the kind of outcomes that you're likely to meet later, or the kind of indicators that you're likely to meet later, are things that they are already collecting, or maybe you can ask them to collect a couple more indicators at relatively low cost, then there's really nothing to do until the rollout has actually happened. So even though the slide says you have to engage with them on a regular basis, the actual investment of time of an economist, of an impact assessment person, comes much later in the pipeline, where in fact you have had enough time elapsed so that you can estimate impact on the various outcomes. Having said that, as I said, this is a fairly promising approach in my view. There is, of course, going to be the pushback that, okay, you may not have a publication bias to have positive results, but if I'm in an M&E team and you come from the outside, you're an independent, you tell yourself that you're an independent impact assessment team, and you're going to tell me that your technology is not working in real life, there is going to be a lot of pushback. On saying that, look, you've used your data and now you're telling us that your stuff isn't working. It can happen. It doesn't necessarily, I don't want to rule it out, because one of the things about the values of impact assessment is it's supposed to be an independent assessment. And what I'm telling you now is to say, yes, it has to be independent, but you have to take the M&E people along if you want to do a good job of assessing what has been the true impact. Now, this is not only in this Melia kind of approach. In fact, one of the main criticisms of the randomized controlled trials, and I didn't mention it up front because I wanted to say it here, is what they call perils of embedded experiments. So the paper that I told you, which got published in the AEJ Applied, which is one of the top 5 journals for economics and agricultural economics, one of the co-authors is a bureaucrat. The bureaucrat who made this, an IS officer who made it possible for them to undertake this study, because without the involvement of the state government and the bureaucracy, it wouldn't have happened. So the question is, well, is it in the IS officer's interest to say that this didn't work, or is it in the IS officer's interest to say, this is a very respectable and respected IS officer, not to impugn anybody's motives, but there is that question of, do you take them along? I've had this issue with NGOs that I can't do my research without the NGOs, and the NGOs say, why aren't you giving me co-authorship? Because without me, you couldn't have done this research. And this is a tension. I don't pretend to know that the answer to this, except to say that you need to have an upfront dialogue, but also be extremely aware of potential conflicts of interest. It doesn't help that the kind of research that this person helped facilitate then becomes a place for him or her to park themselves post-retirement. So this is a clear evidence, or clear, I don't know about evidence, but clear appearance of conflict of interest. So although I do think that the Melia is a very promising approach to look at impact, I think it's perhaps the most robust methodologically. I have to also acknowledge that there are some potential pitfalls in terms of interest. Next slide, please. So what are the takeaways? I think both in terms of whether we're doing small or large scale, I don't think we need to obsess about randomized controlled trials. These are important, but we do need to care about causal impact. We do need to care about rigor. We do need to care about methodological rigor, and to do so using an underlying theory of change. Why is it that you expect these effects to be what they are? What effects do you anticipate? And the second message for me is, I think for far too long we focus on yields, which is important. I don't want to undermine the importance of looking at yields, but we need to start looking at larger metrics of welfare, especially when we have unintended consequences in terms of equity or perhaps natural resources being affected. And all our research, this is to me such a simple thing to do, and I'm surprised not many people do it yet, is let's just do geocoding. Of course, there are questions of anonymity, but we also know how to handle these questions. So this to me are major takeaways. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to reiterate perhaps what I have already mentioned, which is that we should continue to look at impact assessment more broadly, continue to engage with monetary, or start engaging with implementation people ex ante, not ex post. Don't go and assess impact well after the implementation has happened. Also the thing is that this is a place where you do need information on a wide variety of outcomes. Some of it can come from the NFHS survey, some of it can come from the NSS survey, some of it can come from the NCAR surveys. There are multiplicity of surveys that some of it can come from satellite imagery, but that presupposes that these data sets will continue to be there. And I personally am a little concerned that we are not paying as much attention to the continued investment in these large-scale surveys and data sets, and associatedly have a multidisciplinary approach. It doesn't just mean engaging with water technologists if we're looking at water, but it also means bringing the IT people who do have the data science skills, who do have the machine learning skills to improve the quality of our analysis. And finally, my submission is that these kinds of studies actually can go a very long way in addressing questions of cost effectiveness, and in turn can be achieved at relatively low cost. I'll stop there. Thank you. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you, ma'am, for delivering such a thought-provoking lecture on impact evaluation using multiple examples and possible causes of errors while evaluating the impact. We do have one network project on impact assessment of agricultural technologies across the country for ICAR technologies mainly, developed by various institutes. So I'm sure, like, your words have undoubtedly left a profound impact on each and every one of us gathered here today. And we are truly grateful to you for your inspiring insights and valuable contributions on this. So now, like, we have to have release of publications. So I would request Dr. Aarti. So just coordinate your team, and photographer, please be on the front, and all authors, like, we will have release one by one. So you are requested to come on the dais, whoever is present here, whenever respective release is there. So we will have a release of 10 publications today, 5 of policy papers and 5 policy bills. So, सारे लिए we are waiting for information to come.
Yeah, I just want to share the information that you are talking about FPS. It's a really excellent NGO. Last study I know this is working on the foreign partner government, the National Disaster recorded on the we awarded during my studies, my best NGO award in the last one.
I've also interacted with them and I'm very impressed. What they do is not.
So we are having these 10 publications. So 5 of them are policy papers. Policy paper 40, Farmer Producer Organizations in India, Challenges and Prospects by Dr. Vinayak Nikam, Haripriya Visam, Kiran Kumar and Premchandji. And then policy paper 41, which is on can finance mitigate climate risk in agriculture, micro level evidence from India by Dr. Pratap Singh Vittal, Dr. Javeri, Deveshwar and Satyasai. Policy paper number 42, a spatial assessment of sustainability in Indian agriculture by Dr. Premchand, Kiran Kumar, Dr. Suresh Pal and Kalu Nayak. Policy paper suspend बनाने
ये बैठ के नहीं
policy paper number 43, regulation and policy response to groundwater preservation in India by Dr. Prabhat Kishore, Srivastava. Then we have policy paper 44, recently published, from research to impact, payoffs to investment in agriculture research and extension in India by Dr. Ankita, Professor Bithal and Shruti Mishra. So these are the policy papers. Now we come to the policy briefs. So we have 5 policy briefs to be released. So policy brief 53, which is technology and policy option for sustaining pulses revolution. So this is by Dr. Purushottam Sharma, Varun Devpal and Dr. Pratap Singh Bithal. Policy paper 54. Policy brief 54, technology and policy options for efficient use of fertilizers in Indian agriculture by Dr. Sant Kumar, Professor Pratap Singh Bithal, Premchand Ji and Kingsley. Policy brief 55, which is on enabling policies for solar powered micro irrigation by Dr. S.K. Srivastava, Prabhat Kishore, Professor Bithal and C.B. Srivastava. And we have policy brief 56, which is on economic impact of salt tolerant mustard varieties by Dr. Subhasish Mandal, Suresh Kumar, Devendra Singh, and Ankita Kumar. Policy brief 57, which is on impact of prophylactic vaccination in cattle against lumpy skin disease by Dr. Premchand, Dr. Devendra and Siddharth Satwan. So thank you very much, sir and ma'am, for releasing these publications. So now we will have remarks on the annual day lecture. Since our DTP have to leave because of certain engagement, so first of all, we'll have remarks from DTP.
Honorable Professor Ramesh Sanjeev, Madam Dr. Meenakshi Ji, Dr. Bethel, actually Dr. Ajit, and I see a lot of our old colleagues sitting in the front rows in the auditorium. So first of all, my heartiest congratulations to all the staff of NIIT, the present staff, the staff who has retired, who are present online. So it's really a matter of great pride for any institute to celebrate the Foundation Day, because you just introspect, you just set the future roadmap on this particular day. But Dr. Bethel, I feel this is a day of enjoyment, so we should not be much serious on this day, and we must enjoy the day. Madam, your lecture was really very a good treat to celebrate this Foundation Day. Now, one thing which I always cherish is that it's a very small institute, but very important institute. It's the backbone for the whole NAS, not only ICAR. Our two neighboring institutes, ISRA and this. But you see the kind of one ex-director is sitting here. Not like that we have very eminent persons who have come out of this small institute, like Professor Ramesh, Dr. Joshi, you can see Dr. Mrityunjay, and against who is this today's lecturer was there, Dr. Jha, and many more, Dr. Suresh Pal. So all the persons who have really made a big impact at national level for the complete NAS. So small is always beautiful, and that I feel people say in different institutes कि हमारी कैडेट स्ट्रेंथ कम है, हमें लोग कम है, मैं कहता हूँ जितना कम है उतना अच्छा काम कर सकते हैं आप लोग. जिस दिन आप लोग ज्यादा हो गए, you will do the self management, and you will not be really able to do much more things. Like the best example is NIIT. Now my second point is I was talking at NAM just yesterday, before yesterday, that we must develop the policy papers based on the demand, as we are now assessing. That what is the requirement? It's not that I develop the papers based on our own expertise and then our own intuition. And that is the thing which I really cherish from NIIT, that they always develop the policy papers based on the system requirement, based on the request by the different ministries. And that is also one of the reasons why the adoption rate of these policy papers is much higher by the NITI Aayog or by the other ministries, departments, and that we have to really ensure. Not that for own career that I start developing some policy papers, but the importance of policy paper is only once it is adopted by some, and some schemes are framed on that particular paper. And I think that success rate is much higher for NIIT. So my compliments to the entire NIIT, the present employees, the past employees of this who has really set the trend. I was really complimenting Professor Ramesh Sanji that during his time, a lot of initiatives were taken, and specifically a lot of momentum was gained for these policy briefs, policy guidelines, or these policy papers. Lot of things, because I was at the PTFR at that time, and he used to contact me that can you provide me this data, can you just help me in giving such data. So kind of interest which he just said, I think that is being carried forward, and Dr. Brittal has again given a good momentum to this. So my compliments to you also, Dr. Brittal, for your able leadership and for your really contributing a lot for this for the growth of this institute. I can just say that the new initiative which we are now taking, that export ecosystem, and that again I think is a good, is a very big responsibility which is coming to this institute, and we have to make a presentation, we have to make a white paper, that how for the complete NARS we can really evaluate that what kind of commodities, a very detailed analysis we can do, which has been given to the Education Division Assembly, and we heavily depend upon the NIIT for that, and already they have done a very good work. So that is really a very good way ahead which we have to take up for this particular thing. My last request to all my colleagues who are really working dedicatedly is that we know sometimes there is we must think out of box. Really, sometimes we just feel like there is some called Dr. Prasad knows that how many kinds of biases are there in statistics. So normally we say in statistics only one kind of bias we say, but there are if you see the cognitive level biases, I think there are more than 100 biases, which really we must understand. And my request is that let us see that we just abide by those, and we just see that how best really we can help the system. So I was just talking about one bias, and that was the confirmation. So whatever we have got the prejudice mind, we just try to justify those particular things, and we just say, and all other things we try to ignore. And some of the things we could see from the lecture also. Like somebody asked that I had the answer. Can you just tell me that 246, what is the next number? He told next number is 8. Somebody told next number is 12, number is 10 or 7, something. He told, yes, all are correct. But what is the rule? Then the rule was, nobody could explain it. But then one student just out of box thinking, he just told that the rule is that the next number should be just greater than the previous number. That the simple thing we will not think, but we will just see the all complex things. So that simplest thing also we must, sometimes simple things works better than the other things. And I think that out of box thinking, small innovations, and I always quote that we say the invention is the necessity is the mother of the invention. Similarly, the innovation, in innovation we say that opportunity is the mother of the innovation. So in the same way, let us just capture these opportunities which are coming to us, in especially after this COVID, especially in the new changing scenario in the world of AI and many other things. And let us just come out with the out of box thinking. Let us come out what really we can do in the future. So my compliments once again, and I'm really sorry that I have taken this out of turn because 11:30 there was a meeting. I'm getting a call also at the ICAR headquarters. So thank you once again, and I wish all the best on this Foundation Day, all the best for this Foundation Day, and my compliments. Happiest congratulations.
Out of sequence, we would like to honor DD. Thank you very much, sir, for your remarks and best wishes. Now, continuing further, we have remarks by our former directors. Professor Indraprastha is there. Dr. Joshi has sent messages, and Dr. Sureshwar also has sent his wishes. So first of all, I would like to invite our former director, Professor Indraprastha, for his remarks on today's lecture and on annual day. So, sir, you can Professor Mithindi.
Shall I speak a few words?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So thanks a lot for giving me an opportunity to speak to you on this occasion, a very important occasion, celebration. Honorable Ramesh Chand, Professor Meenakshi, Dr. Agrawal, who has left, but other dignitaries on the dais, online, offline, everyone. It's still morning, so good morning to all of you. I will join. It is always a pleasure and privilege to participate in the activities of NCAP, now NIAP. Heartiest congratulations on your 33rd Foundation Day celebrations for your work and contributions during the year, sharing it with friends and well-wishers, and seek their suggestions, advice, blessings for doing still better next year. I mean, this is the purpose of sharing your work. In fact, heartiest compliments to you for having, released 10 very important publications, 5 policy papers, and 5 policy briefs on this occasion. Great achievement. Hope they are all very useful and demand driven, and therefore obviously would be in demand. Now, NIAP is a brand name, to the extent I know about. It is a brand name in the ICR family. As you know, it is 33 years it has been, and crossed many milestones, creating and spreading impact, which now was being told by Meenakshi and then reiterated by Dr. Agarwal. It has made impact, grown from a small NRC with 7 scientists in 1991 to a full-fledged institute of 26 scientists and then a national institute in 2015. I think these are all mega events, changes that the institute deserved and it got. Now its budget has risen from 10 lakhs to 11 crore, which is phenomenal. It has now its own building, infrastructure, state-of-the-art facilities, recognized as an ISO institution. All these have been possible by in-house talent, merit, commitment, leadership, contributions, ably supported by patronage, liberal support from ICR. Now, as Dr. Pratap Singh was making a mention, I think the invaluable support, management support, and other support, blessings from ICR is phenomenal. I think right from the period which I have seen when I assumed the directorship, Dr. Paroda always used to come and then even spend evenings with a get-together function. I think that is the kind of involvement of the top management in ICR activities because it deserves, and therefore they cannot afford to miss it. So they have given their blessings, and a lot of peers have given their wishes. As Dr. Pratap was telling about the first QRT headed by Dr. Vyas, the late Vyas. He was so impressed. In fact, the initiation of NIAP and then the NCAP at that time took 11 years. There were a lot of objections to start the institute because they didn't want an institute other than the Agricultural Economics Division IRI, because it is at the premier place and therefore they never wanted. But it took 11 years. Professor Maji toiled day and night to get it established, and therefore it is an important institution from that angle. It requires support, and all support has been given because of its it is deserving. So dedicated work of all of you. I congratulate each one of you, and collectively and individually. And it is an institution of reputation as a think tank, policy analysis, agricultural economic training and research in the South Asia and then the globe as well. It should aim at, and I always tell that the best is yet to come in NCAP. I think that's my expectation. And obviously there are signs that it would be sooner, but I am just still not convinced why this institution with an existence of 33 years, with all credentials to its credit, as we have heard so far, it has not got the best institution ICR award so far. I think that is what I expect. If possible, the present director, I request him, I appeal to him to see that the formalities of submitting an appeal to ICR to recognize it as the best institution should be obtained at the earliest, because it deserves and it cannot miss it. It cannot afford to miss it. I mean, that's my submission. Now, I'm extremely impressed by the brilliant lecture by Professor Meenakshi. I had some questions I thought that I would get, but definitely I would be getting time when we meet for QRT meetings. I would be further learning from her. But definitely it is a very brilliant lecture. In fact, I ICAR, right from Dr. Jha, I think the topic selection itself is unique in terms of Professor Jha's work. In fact, his work on research prioritization, monitoring, impact assessment started as early as 1965. His co-work with Evenson. Evenson is a phenomenal work that has started agriculture research prioritization work, and he continued till his lost bite. But definitely he's an icon of that particular topic. In fact, I took some initiatives, some interest in continuing his tradition, legacy, in continuing his interest of PME in ICR. In fact, the objective was to institutionalize the PME culture in ICR institutions, because he always used to say PME is inconvenient to the people and therefore it would be resisted, because accountability nobody wants. That's what he used to say all the time. And therefore PME was not able to get institutionalized even now in NARS. Though there are mechanisms, they are mostly non-functional, effectively non-functional. I mean, that kind of a observation. In fact, Dr. Ayyappan, when I was, I retired and then, was, working with IFRI, he asked me to conduct a study on how institutionalization has taken place of PME in the council. After 15 years, I studied and we studied and then found that it is nowhere near what was expected of institutionalizing the PME culture in the ICR. So this is what is the status, but definitely it is very important, as you have already told. In fact, the depth and width to which PME has to proceed is told by you. And I think I have some questions on how to make it institutionalized in a setup where it is resisted and therefore always not wanted. So therefore, I have a lot of admiration for your works, and there are some questions of my own, because I worked intensively in this for quite some time as a research manager, subsequent to my research and education career. But definitely, we will. But I find that your lecture provided kind of a shift from oversimplified, primitive, what is called generic, casual understanding of impact to comprehensive, complete understanding of including even intended, unintended, anticipated, unanticipated insights of the effects of impact. I think these are all dimensions to see that the depth and width of impact assessment is captured and tracked, to see that it goes beyond, as you have rightly said, spread change in people's lives and society. We see products, services, and practices sustainably expand their reach when systems embed change, or when society and culture shift their perspective. In fact, the scope of coverage of impact is very huge. It is not just in words or numbers. Definitely, it has to be more. And then this message you have conveyed very effectively through. So therefore, you have substantially added to the thinking on the depth and width of analytical rigor that is required to continue this impact assessment. And in fact, it's important that it should be formalized, particularly when we see the kinds of investments. I cannot say investments, the spending is going on to the kind of guarantees that is now being offered by different political parties in the papers. If we read, all those need tracking as to what is happening, what would happen to those spendings. So therefore, unless these are captured enough and see that they are communicated back to the policymakers and people, that these spendings will not result in what is expected, I think we need to do that more rigorously. I think we will talk it much more detail later. There is no time now at the moment. But anyway, I congratulate you for having given a very brilliant lecture. I enjoyed it. It is a personal learning for me, and I would learn more when we meet, whenever we meet. Next time, in terms of in the QRT work. Now, again, I congratulate Dr. Pratap Singh for giving a good leadership. As a legacy and tradition of having running the institution with lot of impacts, as people are telling. I am particularly impressed, and I am particularly thanking or congratulating each and every staff member for this professional get together in the morning and the social get together in the evening. Have a good time in the evening so that your professional achievements and personal developments in the families are properly shared, enjoyed, and then they will provide input for your greater work in the coming year. All the best and only the best. Thank you.
Dear
I'm
Dr.
through.
Many thanks for the invitation to attend the NIAP Foundation Day and the 17th Dr. Dayanatha Jha Memorial Lecture. Unfortunately, I regret my inability to attend the much-awaited annual day of NIAP. On this, I extend my heartiest greetings and best wishes to you and all the NIAP faculty and staff. Annual day is the momentous occasion. It is celebration of collective achievements, growth, and spirit of excellence that is set by all the staff of the institute. You need to look back to review and celebrate your achievements and envision future to reshape the path for growth and development of the institute and the nation. I express my sincere appreciation for the remarkable achievements of the institute during the last few years. I'm so happy to know that the institute is touching new frontiers in research, policy making, and capacity building of young professionals. It has acquired its own name at national and global level. Your leadership and contribution is well acclaimed in shaping the institute and its contribution. Your dedication, hard work, and commitment towards advancing policy research in agriculture has attracted attention of all the stakeholders of the institute. I am closely following the progress of the institute and am truly impressed by the impact the institute is making. The notable accomplishments are in the areas such as cutting-edge research, especially on climate change, agricultural diversification, market intelligence, sustainability of natural resources, and impact assessment. Second is collaboration with national and international partners. Third, active participation in various high-level policy forums. Fourth, publications in high-impact journals. And fifth, effective dissemination of policy research to the state and central governments. And sixth, impact of research on society. I admire the leadership and vision in making this institute a true policy think tank. The contribution of young and emerging research team is beyond imagination. I sincerely appreciate their contribution, dedication, using advanced policy tools, and their out-of-box ideas in taking the institute to the newer heights. The young professionals are the torchbearers of change, innovation, and progress. I urge them to think big in transforming Indian agriculture and making India a developed nation by 2047. You have the power to shape the future. Many of you will be there by that time to witness the change made by the institute and the country. I suggest 5-point formula to the young researchers. All you need is to be proactive. Second is embrace emerging opportunities at national and global level. Third is unleash your strength and creativity. Fourth, dream big and act on it. And fifth, research for transformation and social welfare. On this occasion, I also take the opportunity to convey my appreciation to the technical, administrative, and support staff who always wholeheartedly supported and facilitated the activities of the institute. I also suggest them to be the role model in the National Agriculture Research System by demonstrating their caliber and skill in improving efficiency and facilitating the vision of the institute. I shall miss the 17th Dr. Dayanatha Jha Memorial Lecture by Dr. J.V. Meenakshi on evaluating impact at scale. I always admire her research and teaching contributions. I am sure that the lecture will provide new insights to young professionals for their future research. I wish you and your team to continue to push boundaries, explore new frontiers, and inspire future generations of researchers in National Agricultural Research System. My best wishes and personal regards, P.K. Joshi. I am. Thank you to Dr. Joshi for making his presence felt on this day, even though he's on travel and he could not make it personally or online. So thanks to Dr. Joshi. I think Professor Vithal will convey our thanks to Dr. Joshi. Then Dr. Suresh Pal has also sent his greetings and well wishes on this day. I don't know if Dr. Suresh Pal is there online. He can unmute. He checked actually. I think I sent message. He said he will join late.
Thank you, Dr. Rajni Jain. I may not be speak too long, but my greetings to all the guests who are present, and thanks to all my colleagues for the wonderful work they are doing. I especially thank Professor Meenakshi for a wonderful lecture. In fact, some of these elements can be incorporated for doing the impact assessment work, which was done by NAS at a large scale, so one can have some overarching kind of impact for ICR technology, so we can look for that. I am really happy to see some of my young colleagues at this young stage. They have worked so hard. They have worked in such a new areas that their publication, they are truly international. They have published in high ranking. I can name all of them, but really I am happy to see that they are pursuing those areas and they have made a mark. And they are very, very important areas and nobody is working those areas. So once again, I compliment director and all the staff members on this occasion, which we celebrate with great enthusiasm and happiness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for making, for giving your blessings and remarks on this annual day. We really appreciate your remarks, and we are thankful to you for making it possible to attend this annual day, even though online. Thank you. So now we continue further. So we have remarks from dignitaries on the dais. So first of all, I would invite Dr. Ajit Yadav, ADG EQAR. So, sir, you are requested to please give annual remarks.
Eco Namaskar, respected Professor Ramesh, respected ex-directors, Dr. Meenakshi, Dr. Suresh Pal, who are on online mode, Dr. Vithal, Director of this Institute, Professor Meenakshi, Dr. Indraprastha, Dr. Parmanand, other dignitaries sitting here, and the senior colleagues and the young staff. First of all, I congratulate Dr. Vithal and his team on the occasion of the annual day celebration. And I do submit that I'm not a, I'm a presently learner. And because Dr. Vithal, because I joined here about 6 months back. And at that time I said that being a veterinary person, you have to talk to me. But he's a very good teacher. And being a senior to me, he always said, okay, I will first teach you, and then you can understand the issue and then push the things at the assembly level. So I'm fortunate that he is being senior, not at this ICAR, he was senior to me at ICAR as well as at IIIT. And I also just consider myself as lucky to join his program with the eminent person like Dr. Suresh, who I have not seen him physically. And because I'm lucky that I came here and Dr. Mitchell invited to have the talk or to have the interaction with such a great personality of our country who is looking after the affairs of the Planning Commission or the NITI Aayog. Then further, because I had the lecture of Professor Meenakshi, but I say that being the veterinary person, I could not understand many aspects. But the aspect wise, what I understood, that your impact assessment of which Dr. Vittal and his team is doing, or assessment of many technology of ICAR, that is very important, so that in what direction our need is to be required for the upliftment of the farmers' income, for social welfare, for other aspects. But 2-3 observations that I got, and I'm very good learner in the sense that you talked about the vitamin E deficiency model, and that was failed. But I mean, what you can say, livestock person of the veterinarian, that how is the things fail, I don't know, but the supplementation of vitamin E deficiency by supplementation, how it failed. And another observation that AZ, they were likely to have the impact on the water, groundwater, what you can say, depletion. Likewise, Dr. Vittal has and his team is doing what we can say important aspect which the country requires in the current issue and burning issue. On one day, I was just learning many aspects with Dr. Vittal and with Dr. Jha that how the ecosystem of export system has to be now developed by this institute. And I have heard his lecture in many forms, whether state aspect or national aspect, and always he has narrated the things which the country requires in the current scenario. And this institute, I have observed in 6 months that whatever comes for the policy brief or policy paper before our division, I consider that the things are well, what you can say, planned and well studied. And these, in fact, they have long-term effect for our country's economic aspect and other areas of concern. 2-3 best aspect that I want to speak before you, that no doubt you are doing much more focus on your impact assessment and the sustainable agriculture, especially on the aspect of what will happen on crop diversification, water level, solar system, and if we go for some export for a particular, suppose agriculture community. On that day, you were just telling that if our country has potential in a particular commodity, but it needs to be assessed in a long-term effect, whether it will lead to our groundwater effect or pollution, environmental concern, that we have to look and we have to submit our policy to the government. And rightly said that earlier speakers also that this is a very much very important institute for the government to decide the directions, in which direction we have to go for agriculture, commodity, including livestock aspect. In livestock aspect, they have carried out some studies which I am very much impressed, in the sense that I was the stakeholder when they were, what you can say, conducting the such type of study. The impact of vaccination and the losses occurred due to LSD, like lumpish skin disease, and it was a havoc because we have near about 30 crore bovine population, and 40 lakh was affected, and it was a huge loss to the country. And yesterday I was seeing some of the aspects related to this institute. One paper came that how your impact study has made the things for the government to understand that such type of disease can impact to the tune of such great losses. So I know we should be well prepared to tackle such problems. So it is an important aspect. Then another aspect that your institute is doing, what I can understand is the value chain, especially for the non-bovine milk, and that was not being touched by what you can say our policy maker, that this is an important segment that needs to be given attention, because bovine milk is also a segment, but non-bovine milk is not given importance, that how it is impacting the social impact and how we can go for the increase in the income. Another aspect that they are bigger barren lands, in fact, how this will affect ecosystem, livestock production in the time to come. So that is an important area that your institute is doing. And I'm the person that having that this such type of learning experience that I got in last 6 months, and I do consider that the scientists of this institute, they are really committed in their pursuit, in the sense that whatever the areas of national importance they are giving the solutions, they are giving the projections, and because Dr. Parmanand was discussing in the morning, that they have a project with Dr. Vithal's Institute, that how in 2047, the population dynamics will change and how the water, both quality as well as quality, will be a major concern for the country. And how he is saying that we are planning to give some suggestions to have some planning aspect, and that aspect which was very much needed for the country. And in the last, I will say that because Dr. Virthal and your entirety, that I consider that it is my duty to remain in the assembly and to sort out the things related to administration, related to budget, and also related to other aspects of this institute. And I try to convince the concerned authority, whether it is the assembly level or whether it is out of the assembly level, that this institute has an important role that Dr. Virthal was telling that this really deserve much more appreciation from the council side, that they have given a much more impact for the country, for the issues which are requiring immediate concern. So on this aspect, I will just submit my own concern that I will try to give my best to the Vertical Institute as a licensing officer at assembly level. And in the end, I again congratulate all the staff members and also honorable, previous honorable directors who have contributed, and Professor Ramesh Chand is here, who belongs to this institute, for their efforts in bringing such type of glory to this institute. And in the end, I also thank the organizer, especially Dr. Virthal, who has made me the part of your function, and all the best from myself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks and wishes on this annual day. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and esteemed members of our academic community, it is my distinct honor to invite a stalwart in the realm of agriculture policy and research, Professor Ramesh Chand. Professor Ramesh Chand's illustrious career has been marked by unwavering commitment to the advancement of agriculture economics and policy, making profound contributions to the growth and development of our nation's agricultural sector. His visionary guidance and scholarly insights continue to inspire and shape the trajectory of agriculture research and policy formulations in India. With great anticipation, we look forward to Professor Ramesh Chand's remarks as he shares his invaluable wisdom and experiences with us today. Please join with
Dr. R.C. Agarwal, who was with us 20 minutes back, but I have to leave. Dr. Virthal, Speaker of the Day, Professor Meenakshi, our ADG in Education Division, Dr. Ajit Yadavji. I'm also happy to see that from neighboring institute, we have Dr. Indraprastha, Director of ICAR-NIAP, and Dr. Alka Singh, who is Head of Agriculture Economics. We are all part of same family. And former Director of this institute, Dr. Batulya. I feel so happy that despite his poor health, Dr. Suresh Pal took pains to join this function. It is, I think, around 3 a.m. in USA, so Dr. Yoshi couldn't be there physically. Also happy to see other valuable my colleagues. scientists of NCAP, other staff of NCAP, and guests participating in today's celebration of Foundation Day of National Institute of Agriculture Economics and Policy Research. I feel that this is a very significant day for me, and I'm sure for entire NCAP family, those who are working at NCAP or those who are associated with NCAP at any point of time. It's a day to rejoice. It is a day to rejoice because when you see someone with whom you are associated, when you see that person or institution, organization making progress, growing, getting glory, it really gives great satisfaction. So I'm sure that all of you would also be internally feeling very happy to see that the purpose for which this institution was created, that is being more than fulfilled. Despite some doubt in the initial stages in the mind of a couple of other people, all of which have been completely defined and proved wrong. I would say because of very able leadership of successive directors and because of dedicated team, both in science category and research category, technical category, and administration category, that everyone used to be different than but you find in many other institutes. So as Dr. Muthumbia has said that today is the day for you, both for celebration and also I would say for some sort of introspection that what we have achieved, how much we have achieved, whether we are coming to expectation by different stakeholders from us. So both those things I feel are important. And when we reflect on achievement, when we reflect on introspection, I feel that the role of first two directors need to be on this day must be acknowledged. First is the struggle which Dr. Majhi had to undergo to set up these centers. It really required a person like Dr. Majhi that who could succeed in sowing this seed. Probably other person, howsoever intelligent that person would not have been able to push this case in ICR at that time. But Dr. Majhi had totally different kind of quality. Ordinary person couldn't stand before him. I was told that the then DG Dr. N.S. Randhawa, who used to in a way so scared of Dr. Majhi that he instructed the DDG, whatever he's asking you give him, but please don't let him come to my room. So that was the kind of personality, Dr. Majhi, who set up these centers. But then it was only for 4 or 5 years. Dr. Jha took up reign in 1995. You should not, many of you will be knowing all those things, but there are also new faces. So in Indian culture, we have this tradition of through oral communication to carry our history, to carry our information. This is how our Upanishad, our Vedas are alive, only through oral tradition. That time there was no paper, nothing to write, but through oral tradition. So it is important to share these things with young people, that what is history of this institute. That's why I'm saying these things, though many of you know very well about it. So Dr. Jha took over this institute when it was in a rudimentary stage. So he just took it from rudimentary stage to a recognizable stage. that from 2-3 scientists, he increased the number to close to double digit and succeeded in raising it beyond 10, 12. So it was during his tenure that Dr. Pratap and I think Dr. Anjani also joined this institute, Dr. Joshi, Dr. Suresh Pal. So all of us during the time of Dr. Jha. So whatever you are today, if I can make it impersonal, not we are today, whatever you are today, I feel that the critical role of Dr. Jha as an institution builder to lay the foundation. Because once you leave the tradition, they live for a long time. Unless equally strong person come and change those traditions, you will find that those traditions live longer. You go to IRI, they will always talk about Dr. Pal did this thing, Dr. B.P. Pal did that thing. Because the first 2-3 doctors, they set up the traditions. And then you put train on the track, and then you find that it runs on that track. So I feel happy that since then, if you look at life of any institute, many people who write about institutions, they will just say that generally an institution in the initial stage, because of enthusiasm, because of a lot of hope, there is a sport for it, so it rises. It rises at a fast rate. But then in 25-30 years, it reaches peak, plateau, then it stagnates, and after some time it will decline. I feel so happy that no such sign is visible in this institute. It is only getting stronger and stronger in all respects. Like in terms of faculty strength, during my time, it was never more than 16, 17. But now you are closer to your sanctioned cadre strength. Dr. Mathungia mentioned that now you have 26 scientists. And from the serial number of policy paper, that simple indicator speaks of your contribution. That we started with 41 to 46 policy paper, we just released. So in 33 years, 40 such paper, and just 1 or 1.5 years, 5 policy papers. So earlier, only 1 policy paper used to come, or maximum 2 policy paper per year. In some year, there was a drought. But now, in just 1 year, maybe a little more, you have produced 5 policy paper, and I think equally or more number of policy briefs. In fact, some of the areas of concern which I wanted to highlight, which I have noted, I found that those issues are already addressed in the theme of those policy papers. So congratulations to all of you. I really feel happy to acknowledge the lead given by Dr. Pratap and the dedicated work that all of you are doing. That the reputation of this institute is ascending and ascending. There are no signs of it plateauing or showing the stagnation. Now, little bit reflection, which I said that I will speak on, but you have already produced policy paper that the mandate expected from this center was of 2 types. One is that it will serve the need of NARS. It will act as an eye and ear of Indian Council of Agriculture, means that it will offer suggestion and advice to the council in terms of science issues, in terms of research issues, in terms of technology issues, very important area. In fact, the background of Dr. Jha was in that area, and that's why that during his time, you find a very strong output in this area was coming. And second is that issues of related to agriculture policy, whether it is price policy, whether it is subsidy, whether it is employment, trade, or whatever. There are so many areas related to policy. So the thinking was that if the research on policy is done by the scientists who are living among agriculture scientists, the understanding of impact, understanding of implication will be totally different than what is the understanding of those kind of things by economists, respected economists in the mainstream, like Dr. Meenakshi and others. And let me share with you that that advantage has paid me a rich dividend. Once I quote that what is my strength, from where I come, in terms of my argument, generally I find that the opposition to my idea get weakened. It get that resistance. You find that it just goes away. Reason is very simple, that the kind of nuances which you can understand because you are working among agriculture scientists, you are visiting field, you are going to field, you are seeing how things are happening, that many of the things which are which seem to be intuitively opposite of what you expect, maybe you can explain those in a different way. Like lecture of Dr. Meenakshi, at 2-3 places she said that the expected outcome was like this, but from RCT, but they found is opposite of that. But I would say that if someone from ICAR or from among the large agriculture economists had taken up that study, probably the results would have been different. I still feel I need to sit with her and debate with her that how come the results went this way. How come in all the studies which she shared with us, all results are negative? And it also took me to once what Dr. That IIIT Professor B.M. Rao said, that we have to watch this image of economics being a dismal science. We should not always talk about the double whammy, this, that. There are positive side of things. Also, economists are notorious for looking more at negative side than at positive side. So this is a bias of economics profession. But if you carefully look at the publication, I'm saying these things in the presence of Meenakshi. And I'm not that I can say something in her presence, something else in your presence. I'm saying it in her presence. The way agriculture economists look at things, you will find generally a positive bias. The way economists look at things, especially in agriculture, you will generally find a negative bias. Just look at some of these studies and let me know if I'm wrong. So I think the best result will come when we can join hands and do some joint study. Then the rigor of economists, the rigor of experts like Dr. Meenakshi will be there, and understanding of agriculture with scientists who are working in institutes like ICAR will also be there. I can debate on anything, and I can give counter arguments. Like to my mind, eggs that were not created to rest water, groundwater, or something. The main or sole goal was to promote exports. That was the agri-export zones. That main goal is to promote exports, and the primary indicator should have been what happened to exports because of creation of those agro zones. Then other effects are what we call externalities. There can be positive, they can be negative, they are important. But whether the primary goal for which the initiative was taken is achieved or not, that could be, I mean, one way of looking at things. And this is where Dr. Jha, in fact, once he told me, look at this professor, I will not name, so important, doesn't even know that how to pronounce legume. Very famous professor, and but he just mentioned to me, doesn't know how to pronounce legume because she was pronouncing in a totally different. So coming back to this areas of focus of NPEP, I would again say that maybe in your policy paper you have addressed those. And Dr. Mrityunjay also alluded to this. Things like PME note, things like impact assessment about which Dr. Meenakshi talked. One is impact assessment of, say, subsidy, impact assessment of MSP. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about impact assessment of what is happening in ICR. Evaluating technologies, whether ICR is going in the right direction, whether portfolio allocation is going in a right direction, whether we are able to maintain balance between expenditure by state and center. So what are all those kinds of things? And to show the mirror to ICR, that is the, I think, very, very important. Like Dr. Gurwal was mentioning that I was getting data from him. I share with you what data I got and what result we got. I was member of working group and steering committee for 11th 5-year plan of planning commission. And we were looking at what is happening to agriculture sector. And there was a feeling that required progress is not happening in technology. So then Dr. Manthara and Vyas, both of them were member of that. So they asked me, can we look at it? So then I just took data from Dr. Agarwal for last 40 years on what are the different varieties developed by different agriculture university and ICR, and what was the yield potential. So then weighted average, etc. I calculated. One very interesting result came that till about 96-7, the index of technology potential, which I took from the maximum yield of that variety, which was reported when you release a variety, when you apply for releasing a variety by National Variety Release Committee, you give this data, what is the highest yield. So what happened that for 7-8 years, after around, I think, 96, it is there in the Planning Commission report, the index which was rising, it became flat. It became just flat. That in the 7-8 years, many varieties came, but those varieties did not break the yield potentially already attained. So maybe varieties were coming for wider adaptation, whatever, but those varieties, they were not breaking the yield potential. And there is a sort of definite relationship between actual yield and yield potential, that if you do not increase yield potential, your actual yield will start growing after some time, even if there is a yield gap. So for actual yield to rise, the potential yield must keep rising. So between 97 and 2004, exact years I don't remember, it may be 1 year this side or that side, that index became flat. And from that it was concluded that there is a technology fatigue. So once it was there, in a way, Dr. Mangalara expressed this display to me, how you are saying this thing, that thing, but later data shows that in those 7 years in post-green revolution period, the growth was minimal. Even now you can check, and in your paper also, that 80 is very high, then like this, but then you just find that it came low to 2%. So this kind of research only you people can do, who are living among technologies, who understand nuances of technology. So highlighting health of ICR, highlighting health of NARS, that area is very, very important. Then in terms of, again, I come back to lecture by Dr. Meenakshi, that her lecture, to my mind, was primarily on a research tool. Her lecture was on a research methodology, and tools are very important. Once you have a tool, you can do anything. Once you have gun in your hand, you can kill your enemy, you can do shikar, you can do anything. So tools empower you. So this is a tool which is very, very important, and this tool should be used to undertake assessment of so many initiatives of government on which lakhs of crores of rupees are spent, like how soil health card had performed. This country spent so much on soil health card. So what is the output? What is the outcome? Whether it was worth spending that money? Did farmer apply fertilizer based on what was soil health card? Or there were some deficiencies? I mean, an assessment is needed. But what assessment of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana? But what assessment of electronic national agriculture markets? I write occasionally on these things. Inside all those things are happening. But something coming from a research institute, something which is in a published form, has much higher impact. Similarly, MIDH. Often we hear this criticism, no doubt we have horticulture growth so much, but have you seen how much money is going into horticulture, MIDH? No? So all those, like in total, Government of India, we have 126 centrally sponsored schemes. Then there are central schemes, not that all are agriculture, but agriculture also we have so many initiatives. So we need to learn this tool and we need to apply that tool and go for impact assessment. There's a lot of interest in impact assessment, and impact assessment done by outsiders is given much more respect than the impact assessment that is internally done. In Government of India, there is a mechanism to internally also do it. In Niti Aayog, we have DMEO, Development Monitoring and Evaluation Organization. They are supposed to do some sort of impact assessment of every scheme, not one, all 126 schemes, and they do it quickly in whatever way they can do it. And we also work in this area. In fact, I was just feeling that lecture by Meenakshi came as a God-given blessing to me, because today and tomorrow we are having 2 days workshop with OECD on monitoring and evaluation frameworks. You know that in evaluation framework, this impact assessment was the dominant kind of tool, but OECD expanded it. OECD, some of you may be knowing, brought a RISI framework. The RISI framework is that we should not only look at impact, we should look at many other impact also, which also determine impact, which itself are also impact. Like whether the project was relevant for a particular situation. Like if, for my lecture, I was preparing in the evening, so I just wrote it, that if you are constructing a canal for a very high rainfall area, it is much less relevant than if you are constructing a canal for semi-arid tropics. So RISI first R is relevance, then it is efficacy, then it is effectiveness, then S is sustainability, then I is the impact assessment. So OECD expanded it to 5. And now they have added another C, coherence, because there are multiple approaches for development. What is the coherence? And from NITI side, we have added E to it. So it is VC plus C plus E. E we added it because of emphasis on inclusive growth, that what is happening to equity as a result of all those things. So there is, but I said all those things, that in the internal mechanism of the government, these kind of things are evaluated, but that is very limited kind of evaluation. That 10, 12 people evaluating 126 schemes, they will just take input from the states. Occasionally, we will conduct survey, like I conducted a survey on ENAM. And I found that market committee were playing total fraud with it. There was no electric option anywhere, only the commodity which got sold was entered into computer, and it was called electronic marketing. This was 4 years back. Things might have changed after that, because I sent that note to PMO and PM, and serious view was taken. So things might have changed after that. So like this, I think, Dr. Pratap, now you have 26 scientists. Now you have opportunity to develop their specialization also. If you have 8, 10 people, then you can't say no to council. You can't close your eyes to what is happening around. So you have to put same person in 2, 3 areas. But with reasonable number, 26 number means now you are among, I would say, biggest economics school in the country. I don't find anywhere 26 agriculture economists working at one place. IG only 5 people are there. So, CMA of Ahmedabad, again, you will find only 5 people are there. So a team of 26 people, only in one branch of economics is a big success. It provides opportunity for further specialization and then divide the work. How many of you will do impact assessment of government scheme? How much of you will take up research on this related to science policy, related to research area, science policy really, which at one time, I think during time of Dr. Jha and came to be known because of that kind of work, which was subsequently taken up by Dr. Suresh Wala and Dr. Alka Singh. I don't know what is the current status. So science policy, research policy, very, very important, and only this organization can take. Then impact assessment is other area. Then in the general area, I find that you are doing very good research. During my time, I didn't see except 1 or 2 paper by Dr. Pratap Virthal coming in high impact international journal, but now it is a common thing for such paper from this institute to be seen in the high impact journals. So there are a couple of other things, but I think those I will individually discuss with Dr. Pratap, that if now he had to decide how research is to be done at this institute with 26 people, and the kind of suggestion which came from Dr. Mithunjaya, even from Dr. Sureshwal, and what inference I could have from lecture by Dr. Meenakshi for research at this institute, and the 2-3 area which I have mentioned. Maybe you should organize some brainstorming where you invite these senior people to draw a searchable agenda for this institute to maximize your output. You are now also doing very good output. But once you start doing well, the expectation from a high performing person are different than expectation from a poorly performing person or institutions. Since you have performed, expectation are rising, and you have to come to the occasion. And I know that under your leadership and the kind of team which you have, it is possible for you to deliver much higher outcome. So at the end, once again, I wish Neha a very, very bright future. I look forward to NIAP playing a much bigger role in national level policy making, and also within NARC and within ICAR. And I also feel that by doing those things, it will also lead to your own welfare. And that has emerged as a great platform for upward mobility. If today I am there in UP, I know if I was not in this institute, I don't think that that thing was possible. So, and from this institute, 2 DDCs, 1 chairman of Agriculture Price Commission, 2 members, 2 senior level people in IPRI. If you look at data before 30 years, from entire NARS, only 1 person went to IPRI, that was Dr. Jha. So that is the kind of difference which this institute has made. I think by doing good work, it is good for the institute. It is also good for you. It is usually, I would say, very good and rewarding. So with these words, once again, I wish you great future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful comments and for sharing the historical events of the Institute on this day. And additionally, thank you very much for your valuable advice on researchable issues. So now, keeping our tradition, we would like to honor our chief guest and dignitaries on the dais with the shawl and memento. So first of all, I would like to request the chairman to please honor our keynote speaker for this annual day, Dr. J. Meenakshi. Yeah. So, also request the audience to join this honor with the beginning. Now I request our director to please join the chairman. Ready, sir? We have now reached to the end of this session, and in this session, we are immensely benefited by the presence of the dignitaries, distinguished personalities, and the guests. May I now invite Dr. Akash Saxena to present the formal vote of thanks. Dr. Akash. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with the utmost privilege that I stand before you to extend my heartfelt thanks, gratitude on this auspicious occasion. We are grateful to the esteemed chief guest of today's event, Professor J.V. Meenakshi, for graciously accepting our invitation to deliver 17th Professor Dayanatha Jha Memorial Lecture. Madam, your choice of lecture on a pivotal topic from impact to scale reflects your deep insights into the pressing issues. It is actually a very important topic and everybody is looking forward to impact assessment. Your discourse has illuminated numerous avenues for research on this enlightening theme, emphasizing the importance of transitioning from impact assessment to scalable solutions. The gracious presence of Professor Ramesh Chand, Member Agriculture Niti Aayog, in this program, amidst an overwhelmingly packed schedule, reflects and resonates profoundly with the significance attributed to NIAP and the entire agricultural economics fraternity. Sir, your guidance is extremely important for us, and we look forward to your blessings always. Professor Chand stands as a beacon of transformative leadership, having spearheaded pivotal reforms in our nation's agricultural policies. We are inspired by your exemplary dedication, profound insights, and visionary guidance. Thank you, sir. We are deeply grateful to Honorable Director General of Indian Council of Agricultural Research, our Deputy Director General, Dr. R.C. Agrawal, Assistant Director General, Dr. Dayanatha Jha, for their continuous support and guidance to NIAP. NIAP has always held a special status within the Council, receiving unwavering support and encouragement throughout. Ladies and gentlemen, today, as we gather on this special occasion, we cannot help but remember with deep reverence and fondness the remarkable Professor Dayanatha Jha. Dr. Professor Jha was not only a great leader, but also a true institution builder. As our past speakers, they have highlighted how this institution was built, and it's extremely important to understand all these values and ethics in the system, and whose legacy continues to inspire all of us. His passion and relentless pursuit of academic and institutional excellence have helped shape NIAP into what we are today. As we pay tribute to Professor Jha, we also extend our heartfelt gratitude to his family. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a special occasion as we are blessed to have our esteemed mentors and gurus amongst us. We extend heartfelt gratitude to our former directors and our teachers. We have with us Dr. Dayanatha Jha, Dr. P.K. Joshi, his blessings are with us, Professor Ramesh Chand, and Dr. Suresh Pal. Sirs, your presence here today is not just an honor, but a source of immense inspiration for all of us. Your insights, Your experiences and expertise continue to guide us in all our endeavors, and we are privileged to have the opportunity to learn from you all always. We are immensely grateful to the directors from neighboring institutions. We have Dr. Rajan Prasad with us, Dr. Ramanand was there. And we have our esteemed colleagues from CG Institutes. We have Dr. Anjani with us, and we have colleagues from Ministry of Agriculture, our own colleagues from NAS, Dr. N.P. Singh, Dr. Vijay Shata, Dr. Smita Surohi, Dr. Alka Singh, and we have many of our previous colleagues. Madam Neha is there, Yadavji is there, and Narayanji is there. So we welcome all of you, and we thank all of you for gracing this function and your presence. Your participation adds great value to this gathering and reflects the spirit of collaboration and camaraderie that exists within our community. Thanks to you all. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to all the distinguished professionals, academicians, and students joining us live on social media, actively listening to our esteemed dignitaries. Your presence enriches our discussion, and we hope that our esteemed speakers' vision, thoughts, and ideas will serve as a source of enlightenment and inspiration to you all. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. P.S. Wilton, Director of our Institute, for his unwavering guidance, encouragement, and support in organizing this event. Sir, we sincerely acknowledge your dedicated efforts towards advancement of agricultural economic research in the country. We are also thankful to NIAP faculty and staff. Our deep sense of appreciation for Dr. Rajni Jain, Dr. N.R. Kumar, Dr. Khemchand, Dr. Subhash Chand, Dr. Sant Kumar, Dr. Anil Kumar, Dr. Vinayak, Dr. Jaya, Dr. Aarti, Ankita, Dilip, Shri Khali ji, Dr. Shri Mangal ji, Sonia ji, Navdeep ji, Ajay Kumar ji, Indrajit ji, Tevatia ji, Deepak, and entire NIAP team. I'm sorry if I have forgotten someone, for entire logistic support in making this event successful. I thank one and all. I take this opportunity to extend our most sincere thanks to our guest devotees from different institutions and destinations. Many of us, we are live on social media. I could see a few directors are there, few colleagues from CG institutions are there, our own colleagues are there online, and we thank all of them. At the end, I thank one and all for their gracious presence and patient listening. Wish you all a pleasant day, stay safe, stay healthy. And I wish to invite everybody for high tea outside. And before that, we will have a group photograph with all of you. Thank you so much for joining.